Hey, seventh grade. For today's lesson, we are going over our properties of operations again, except today we are going to put three of them into practice. So your three goals are to use the associative property, the commutative property, and the distributive property to solve expressions. Today will feel pretty simple for those of you who um, watch the video and follow the steps. But when you get to actual algebraic equations, it's not going to tell you what property you should use. So it's going to be up to you to use different properties to help you navigate through your assignment. So you have three types of problems today, and you're being graded more on using the property than on the correct answer. So the first property that you will need to use is the associative property. So the associative property basically says that we can use parentheses to change the order of operations when we have a problem that is all addition or all multiplication or all subtraction. And what we're going to do is we're going to use parentheses to change the order of operations. So when we are solving expressions or equations, we use the order of operations to determine what order we solve each step. And parentheses always goes first. So for this problem, and I made these pretty simple, so it probably won't make too big of a difference on how to solve them, but I want you to use the properties. So we have 16 plus 94 plus 6. And I know that's pretty simple, but I want to make my life even easier, and I am going to put parentheses around the 94 plus 6. So when I do that, that means that I am going to solve the operations in parentheses first. So I am going to still have the 16 plus, and now I have 100, which makes it very easy to add 16 and 100 to get our final answer of 110. So without the associative property, we would have done 16 plus 94 first because we would add from left to right. The parentheses changed everything. Notice that we don't change the order of the numbers, but the parentheses changes the order that we do the operations. This multiplication problem will make things a little bit easier. We would normally do 7 times 1/2 first, which, while it's not impossible, it's not that fun either. So I'm going to use parentheses, put them around 1/2 times 16, and I want to do that first, because half of 16 is 8. So now I have 7 times 8, which we know is 56. So in this case, the associative property had us use parentheses so we could find half of 16 first, because multiplying 7 times 8 is a lot easier. If we did it the other way, if we did it 7 times 1/2 times 16, that would get us 3 and 1/2 times 16, which, while that still equals 56, 3.5 times 16 is quite a bit more difficult than 7 times 8. So on your questions that ask you to use the associative property, even though I know you're capable of solving it without the property, use parentheses and prove that you can do the property. All right, next one, the commutative property. This is where we actually switch the order of the numbers to make our lives easier. So we're not going to use parentheses here, even though the associative and the commutative property say something similar. So we're going to rearrange the numbers into an order that might make your life a little easier. So you have to rearrange the numbers for the commutative property. I'm going to start with 100 plus 16 plus 9. And if you do something different, right, you could have done 16 plus 9 plus 100, right? That's just using the commutative property again. Mix up your numbers in a way that you think makes your life a little easier. So on the left here, I now know, well, 100 plus 16 is obviously 116, and 116 plus 9 is 125. Here, some of you might have wanted to add the smaller numbers first, and then once you have 25 plus 100, it's very easy to solve. So both of those methods were correct because I switched the orders of the number. All right. Again, multiplication makes it a little easier to see why it would be useful because most of us can add pretty well. So I don't want to find 1/4 of 50 because I think that'll make my life a little difficult. So I'm going to switch that to 1/4 of 24 times 50 because I know that 1/4 of 24 is 6, which is a nice whole number. And I can finish that out with 6 times 50, which is 300. So up here, I switch the order of the numbers around to make my life easier. Because 1/4 times 50, it's like, okay, I know that's 12.5, but that's still a little complicated, especially if I'm now trying to multiply by 24. Hopefully you can see that the commutative property made this problem easier by simply rearranging the numbers. Last property, this is the distributive property. So this says that when we are multiplying, we can break apart one of the numbers to make the equation easier. So I am going to break apart the 9.7, or the 9 7/10, into 9 and 0.7. And you can break apart your numbers however you want, but remember they have to add up to equal your original number. And I think splitting it into 9 and 0.7 is going to make my life a little easier. So both of these are still being multiplied by 600. So I have 600 times 9 plus 600 times 0.7. So they're both being multiplied by 600 still. But now I figure I can solve this in my head quite a bit easier than multiplying 600 times 9.7. 600 times 9, well, I know that 6 multiplied by 9 is 54, and I add my 2 zeros, plus, remember, order of operations, we're doing our multiplication first, 600 times 0.7, well, I know that 6 times 7 is 42. I'm going to add my 0, and we have a decimal point here, so we're not going to add another one. And 5,400 plus 420 is 5,820. So the distributive property allowed me to take a somewhat complicated multiplication problem, broke it apart into two easier ones, and I just combined the answer. This problem, we're going to be doing the same thing, except I'm trying to prove that it doesn't have to be a decimal. So I'm going to break apart this 16, and I'm going to break it apart into 10 and 6, because I know that this 10 is going to be easy to multiply by. So I have 42 times 10 plus 42 times 6. And if I wanted to break this down even further, I could. I could break apart this 6 into 5 plus 1. But breaking it apart into two numbers is typically going to be fine. So 42 times 10 equals 420, plus 42 times 6, which is 252. And if you need to write out your steps to solve some of these problems, that's still fine. But hopefully some of you are able to do this in your head. So I could not do 42 times 16 in my head very easily, but I could do 42 times 10 and 42 times 6. And I can certainly add up 420 plus 252, which gets us a total of 672. So those were our three properties. I am much more concerned that you know how to use these properties as opposed to you getting the correct answer. Good luck.